Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I'm going to be talking about Kugane Maruyama's light novel series, Overlord. This is going to be volume number 2. Now, volume number 1 introduced us to Eins Ol Down, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I've only ever read it, so I can only kind of go by what it is in my head. He is a player of an MMORPG called Yggdrasil, and he decides to stay logged into the game on its very last day as it's being shut down and all the servers are being shut down. And he actually, instead of getting logged out of the system, finds himself suddenly as a true incarnation as the undead creature that he has played in the game, and that he is surrounded suddenly by the NPCs that they had created, he and his fellow players that had created to populate their mighty tomb, and that they are now actually living creatures with the very characteristics that they had been given as part of their backstory by the guild members. Now, this book picks up pretty much right after the end of volume number 1, and Eins at this point decides that what he really is lacking is information. And he's very guarded about the fact that he isn't sure whether there's any other players that are in this world, and he isn't sure just how powerful they may be if they are. And because he played Yggdrasil as sort of an enemy, as a monstrous character, he kind of fears that if there are hero characters, people that played heroes in this world, that he could be in a lot of danger. And so he decides to adopt this persona and go out as an adventurer and to hide his identity and to try and make various connections through the adventurer community and to try and gain a reputation for himself so that he can find out more information and find more resources in order to protect himself and the occupants of the tomb. Now, of course, things go awry and there are dark forces at work in the city that he decides to visit. There are ramifications of his actions from book number 1 that sort of come back to haunt him. All in all, Overlord number 2 is a really good fantasy novel. Now, you would think that the whole player from our world, trapped in a video game world, would be really overplayed at this point. And I kind of went into volume 1 thinking that I wasn't expecting a whole lot, and I was pleasantly surprised. Well, this volume, I would say, continues to take that even a further step. This is a really great fantasy series. It is starting to flesh out this world, the magic systems, the way that potions and everything else operate. And for Eins as a character, because he played as this undead monster, he's finding even more so in this book that he's beginning to adopt that persona. And it makes it very, very cool, at least as far as I'm concerned, as a reader, to read about a hero who really isn't afraid to do the dirty work. And he isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. I mean, he orders the wholesale torture and human experimentation of prisoners that he took in the first volume, and without even a second thought, because he is a character who is wholly dedicated to his own survival, which we don't often see that kind of self-centeredness in a lot of light novels, and in particularly sort of the light novels that deal with the whole I'm trapped in a video game world. In fact, the whole video game world thing, it's funny because unlike a lot of series which seem to really dedicate themselves, in this particular genre, that seem to really dedicate themselves to trying to have their heroes figure out a way out of the world that they're trapped in, Eins doesn't really seem to care about that. In fact, as far as his previous life as a Japanese blue-collar worker, really a lot of that in this book kind of gets forgotten. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's forgotten unintentionally, but the lessons that he carries from that life are very select. And in reality, he really has no desire to return to that life. It's his nostalgia and his sorrow at losing the game world of Yggdrasil and his fellow players of Yggdrasil that probably informs his character a lot more than the fact that he was once this modern-day Japanese male. Which is a very interesting take on the character, that he isn't seeking to escape. He's seeking to become the greatest overlord that he can be. He's seeking to try and make sure that the NPCs that he and his fellow guild members created, that they are safe and that they live these fulfilling lives, and that he is doing right by the NPCs and he is doing right by his fellow guild members and upholding the guild name that he's now adopted as his own name. So this series, if you read it like a fantasy series more so, it is really awesome. I mean, in this volume, there are all sorts of different kinds of monsters and creatures, and as I said, a lot more world building as Ainz is sort of trying to figure his way through things. It's little details like the fact that he realizes he can't read the writing in this world and the difficulties that that creates for him. And there's other sort of like little details, like this volume is filled with a lot of action, but there were also a lot of parts that I found myself sort of laughing at. And I just really love this character that seems to constantly be riding this wave of gray. There's no black or white. It's not really good or evil. It's just so self-serving and so single-mindedly pursuing his own end that what he has to do to get there really doesn't matter a whole lot to him. And his decisions about whether to do good or whether to do evil are based wholly on what gives him the greatest benefit. And part of me really hopes that that never goes away. I mean, often it seems in series where you have sort of a character that has questionable morals, there often seems to be that whole drive to try and redeem the character. But I really hope that doesn't happen with this series, because it is the thing that, to me, really sets it apart and really makes it interesting. And trying to figure out what this character is going to do is, he's unpredictable, because you don't know how he's going to solve a solution, because it isn't always, or like solve a problem, because it isn't always going to be the right thing to do. If there's an easier path, he may very well take it, even if it involves having some people die. I mean, it makes the book so much more unpredictable, which makes it so much more fun. And watching him struggle with, he has these NPCs that, of course, were programmed by players who played undead monsters, and so they infused this sort of hatred of humans and looking down on humans and everything else into their creations. And so Ainz, as he's trying to find his way through this world, is also dealing with the difficulties of trying to manage the behaviors of his underlings. And it's a whole other aspect of this series that you really don't get in anything else, at least certainly not anything that is available in the official English language. And this volume goes to some lengths of starting to introduce various politics, in introducing sort of potential enemies and other threats to Ainz and his cohorts. There's also some suggestions about sort of the larger world and the larger mythology, and Ainz himself is starting to question whether previous players of Yggdrasil are in fact some of these legendary and mythological characters. So it's really kind of cool to see how this world's coming together, and we still have no idea what world it actually is and why Ainz is even in it. But it's a hell of a lot of fun. I really like this series, probably more than I imagined that I would. And as I said, it's a really good sword and sorcery fantasy series, and the whole trapped in a game thing is really just a minor footnote. If you approach it almost like Ainz is just a person who lived in Yggdrasil and now is in this world, it almost is just as good. You can almost completely forget the fact that he, was a modern day individual playing a game. So it works on a bunch of different levels. A really cool series. A lot more violent and gory and gruesome in places than the average light novel. I believe somebody said on my review of volume number 1 that this one is actually aimed at a slightly older age group, even though it's still considered a light novel. So that certainly comes through. And it comes through in the writing as well, the complexity. And I don't feel that this one is quite as light reading as a number of other series that we've had. And just a little footnote, I know that somebody has asked me to talk about art now and then and stuff like that. And this book, I think, is a really great series to talk about. As much as my pocketbook and bank account hate the fact that these are being put out in hardcover only in the English market, I gotta say, Yenon has done a beautiful job. This is probably, of all the light novels that I've seen released, this is the series that should be in hardcover. The artwork is far more like it's that painter style as opposed to strictly, like a manga. And the color images are actually throughout. Like each chapter begins with a new colored painting, and just the format and the way that the book is laid out, they've done a really beautiful job. Like, this is actually a series that, as I said, as much as I financially dislike it, I have to say, for on my shelves and being able to appreciate how well this package has been put together, it's really, really well done. I will give credit at least to Yenon on that one. So those are my thoughts on Overlord Volume number 2. Really, really good series. It's surprised me, I will have to say. Coming kind of later in the game after a couple of other big trapped in a video game world titles, I wasn't sure what to think, but I've been really, really suitably impressed with this series, and I'm pretty excited for the new volume that'll be coming out, I guess, in probably a couple months. So next week, I'm going to be talking about another light novel series that I've been enjoying, another fantasy light novel series, which is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? This one is going to be volume number 6. So we're starting to get up there in this series as well, and that'll be my review next week. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe so you can check out this review, plus all my future light novel reviews, including future volumes of Overlord. If you want to check out my older light novel reviews or my manga reviews, you can check those links up at the top. And don't forget, I don't just read books, I like to write them too. I've got links, you can check those out as well. So again, thanks very much for watching the video, everybody. I will see you next week. Until then, bye-bye for now.